Hi, guys. Welcome. And who dat? I'm Joe. And today I'm going to be talking about the whole Dennis Allen, Arthur Smith, Jameis Winston debacle. All right, so everybody knows the story if you watch the game versus Atlanta. The Saints intercept the ball. Tyrann Mathieu could have just slid down because all he had to do was run the clock out at that point. He was trying to bring it back for a touchdown. So he gets tackled at the 1, and Dennis Allen decides we're just going to go in victory formation. And Jameis Winston gets out there to be the quarterback. Jamal Williams is the running back. Jamal Williams hasn't had a touchdown all year. He led the league in touchdowns last year with 17. And Jameis Winston decided in the huddle, hey, why don't we just go ahead and give Jamal a touchdown? Well, out of the victory formation, it leaves Atlanta vulnerable. I guess there's this unwritten code. A couple of years ago, there was a team who, if the opposing team was in victory formation, this defense decided to hit the offensive line anyway. They were going to try to get to the ball. And the coach, I forget which team and which coach it was, but his justification was we're trying to win the game. We're trying to get the ball. If you're going to line up in a give up formation, we're going to go after you anyway. They did it a couple of times. It was a big hoopla. No rules changes were made as far as I know, but I guess it was established at this point. It's an unwritten rule that when one team's giving themselves up, the other team's supposed to just stand there and let it happen. So, as far as that goes, yeah, I don't like the idea of doing it from a victory formation. But Jameis wanted to give Jamal a touchdown. They knew they could get it through a victory formation, and nobody was going to get hurt. It's 1 yard. Jamal Williams can get that. So when it happened, at the time it happened, as a Saints fan, I'm like, we pulled them and scored a touchdown. Yeah, let's run up the score. Let's go for 2 points. I was ready to go for a 2-point conversion at that point. Yeah, we're sticking it to the Falcons. That's what it felt like. And then we find out at the end. First, Arthur Smith has this moment where he's yelling at Dennis Allen, so the cameras catch all of it. Nice little moment. Arthur Smith shaved his mustache so we could read his lips better. And you didn't have to read his lips. You could hear it on the mic. You could hear it over the broadcast. And, when Dennis Allen said, oh, I understand that, I started laughing because I thought, well, Dennis called it. And he's like, well, I understand you're mad, but we did it anyway. But no, that's not what happened. Dennis Allen goes out there in the post-game press conference and immediately apologizes to Atlanta and to Arthur Smith and says that they had called victory formation and, basically threw his players under the bus. Well, then the players were interviewed after, and they all said, yeah, we did it, and we know the coach didn't want us to do it, and we did it anyway, and if I had a chance, I'd do it again. So the only thing I would have changed wouldn't have worked. If Jameis would have said, okay, let's run a play from the 1 yard line, and they would have gotten some other formation besides victory formation, Dennis Allen would have called a timeout. So they just went ahead and did it. And, okay, so we're talking about it. Does this mean the players don't respect Dennis Allen? I think basically when he was the defensive coordinator, all of the defensive players respected him because of the system. And it was a big phrase used by the captains. Demario Davis and Cameron Jordan often would say, you just believe in the system, just do your role, do your part, and it's going to work out. And so that is mad respect for Dennis Allen because of the system. As long as he's your defensive coordinator, maybe sometimes you feel like the game plan's not quite there, But you still know if you do your job, in the end, whatever's the truth's going to come out. So you just do your job. And if it's not the plan that was going to work and you did your job anyway, well, then it's going to be reflective on the coaches. The players need to run the play that's called, right? But as a head coach, Dennis Allen has made a lot of mistakes. And I think the biggest mistake he made from the get-go with this team, if there was a point when he lost this team, it was in week 3 versus the Packers. Because Derek Carr gets hurt. Seems like you have no idea what to do at this point. You just have to run the clock out. And, Jameis Winston comes in, and I think there's a disconnect between this coaching staff and Jameis Winston. Whether they don't know what to do with him or they don't want to do anything with him, I don't know. But when Jameis Winston gets involved in the game plan, we're all thumbs. I think that's the big disconnect. I believe it's the way Dennis Allen handles Jameis Winston. I'm serious. I'm not the biggest Winston fan. As a matter of fact, when we signed him, I thought it was horrible. I never liked him as a quarterback. And all this time we've had him on the team, hey, I'm not a player in that locker room. I don't know Jameis Winston. I'm pretty sure he's a pretty good dude because everywhere he goes, everybody vouches for him and they love playing with him and stuff like that. Hold on. So Jameis Winston as a player, I'm not sure how he elevates the team or helps the team or, goes out there as a player and makes the team better and we win. I don't see that. But I do see all of the players gravitating to Jameis Winston. They like having him as a teammate. And, he's a good professional football player given the time. Perhaps he does get good. If he had been the starter for this team and he would have stayed healthy and he'd been our starter for the last 3 years, let's say, maybe he'd be pretty good by now with this offense. I don't know. But I know the players like him. So after that week 3 game, when Derek Carr was hurt and you're starting your practice for your week 4 matchup against Tampa Bay, this is the perfect spot for Jameis Winston. The perfect spot for him to come, play quarterback, let Derek Carr heal up, let Jameis Winston see what he can do against his old team. This was the time. And Dennis Allen decided, no, we're going to go with his pet project, Derek Carr, Derek Allen, instead of Jameis Winston. And I think he lost a lot of players with that decision. Because you went out there with an injured Derek Carr, who, as far as an attitude, hey, he might be a good teammate, he might be a good coworker, but as far as personality goes, he ain't got nothing on Jameis Winston. And I'm assuming this. Like I said, I'm not a player. I'm not in there. But I can just tell. I think I could get along with Derek Carr. But I think I would enjoy my time with Jameis Winston a little more. It's just the way it is. We could all go to church on Sunday together. But I'm probably going to go party with Jameis instead of Derek. So I think he lost a lot of the players at that point. So when this moment happens and Dennis Allen decides to throw all the players under the bus, well, Jameis Winston's going to get the brunt of it. And Jameis tried to be as mature as possible. And Jameis is pretty animated and a little goofy and fun. And, he's honest. It seems to me like as though he tries to be as honest as he can be. He didn't mean to go against what the coach said. He just had an idea. He knew the coach wouldn't go for it. It's the last game of the year. Jameis is probably never going to take another snap with the Saints again, especially if Dennis Allen has anything to do with it. I'm getting those two confused now because they're one and the same. So they go together. And that kind of loyalty went against what the players really wanted. And it happened after the week 3 game. It happened in preparation going into Tampa Bay, and we saw the results. Dennis Allen made a choice. It wasn't what the players wanted. This is how I feel. And they got their butts whipped as a result. So after that, it's kind of like, sure, whatever you call on defense, I'll do because you're a brilliant defensive coordinator. But the decisions that you make as a head coach, I'm not too sure about. Now, I'm going to give Dennis Allen some credit for some of the decisions he made. Sitting Trevor Penning seemed to be a pretty good decision. We were awful in allowing sacks the first 3 weeks, and after we sat Penning, we got a lot better. So I got to give him kudos for that. That's a hard decision to make. When he decided to start Jonathan Abram instead of Jordan Howden, because Howden missed practice early the week before, went ahead with the veteran. The veteran had a great day. He decided to sit Alontae Taylor, and Taylor bounced back with his first interception ever. Then he sat him again when he was at nickel in the next game, the Atlanta game, and lo and behold, Isaac Yiadom gets a concussion, and so now Taylor has to go on the outside, which is where I think he's going to end up when it's all said and done, and Taylor ends up having an interception from the outside. So he got benched as the nickel, but had to go back in and play outside and ended up performing pretty good. So there's decisions that, Allen's made that I can agree with. And, of course, a ton of them that I don't. This is where the disconnect comes in. Because after the season was over and this spectacle was, played out in front of the media, we have this end of the year press conference with Dennis Allen, and he tells everybody he expects to be retained as the head coach and that he's going to start to focus on cultural issues. So the culture with the Saints has never been an issue. It's been one of the things that Sean Payton preached about. And when it started to get off the rails and we went 3 seasons with 7-9 record for 3 seasons in a row, Payton identified some players that weren't bought into the culture, into the, the message and the staff, and they cleared house, and we ended up having a good draft, and we ended up turning the defense around, and we ended up being really competitive the last 5 years. Breeze and Payton were here, except for that very last year. So the culture, I think, is the ownership and the general manager think that the culture established by Sean Payton was going to be embraced and extended by Dennis Allen, and that this franchise is going to operate the same way it did with this culture, the buy-in, and this is the path. As long as Dennis Allen is your defensive coordinator, I can buy that. And as long as you have a head coach like, let's say, Sean Payton, who never backs down, who's always aggressive, who always makes moves that are questionable, and then, in the end, you see what happens. But the players respected Sean Payton. They respected his decisions. And, of course, he had the skins on the wall, too. So there's that kind of respect is not there for Dennis Allen. And it's reflective on all kinds of things. You can point at a lot of things and say, yeah, like Matt says, he's a substitute teacher. He's not the real teacher, and so he's not going to get the same respect. So Dennis Allen is going to be retained as our head coach, and he's going to take care of the culture issues in the locker room. Now you're talking about players who were bought in for years and all of a sudden aren't bought in anymore now that he is head coach. And that's a hard pill for me to swallow. If you're going to make significant changes to this franchise, I don't think Dennis Allen is the guy that should be the head coach in charge of making these decisions. I mean, I can see him and Mickey Loomis sitting there dreaming of the days with Drew Brees and Sean Payton and saying, yeah, we got to keep this culture, so let's get rid of the guys that are bad for the culture now. Well, who are those guys? Marshawn Lattimore. He's always had a bit of an attitude. Didn't practice hard, Well, this year he came in and he was the best player on the field in training camp. He and Paulson Adebo. And so, he leads with his example. He's never really said anything too outlandish that I can recall, but he is, if there's going to be one player on the team that's kind of a prima donna, it's Lattimore. Hey, he's one of the best cornerbacks in the league. He is a shutdown guy. But our defense has proven that we can play really good pass defense without him. He's missed 17 games in the last 2 seasons, and we haven't seen much of a letdown as far as the secondary goes. At that Rams game, the Rams game could have been different. Hey, Marshawn was there for that Tampa Bay game. We got smoked for that one, too. But anyway, Marshawn Lattimore could be one of those players. Another one is certainly Michael Thomas. You want to talk about prima donnas. Michael Thomas is another guy that demands the ball. He demands the attention. He needs to be your number one. And when Derek Carr and Michael Thomas are playing together, Carr probably feels like he has to feed the ball to Thomas all the time. And if you're not calling the routes that Thomas is best at, and maybe Carr can't throw those routes, there's a disconnect. And our offense got better when Michael Thomas was hurt. After Michael Thomas left, we seemed to get a little better. It took a game or two, but we finished the year very strong without Michael Thomas on offense. It has a lot to do with Derek Carr distributing the ball, not having to worry about feeding it to Michael Thomas all the time. Is that an issue game to game? I think it is. When Michael Thomas says just enough and you kind of get his attitude, and then he tweets a lot and says things, and then you don't get him the ball a lot, and so the next game you feed it to him early and he ends up getting hurt. The game plan was probably just feed Michael Thomas, just throw it to him every day. And you know what? When Drew Brees was here, that's what Drew Brees did. That's why Michael Thomas had that record-breaking season, because it works. For some reason, Carr couldn't make it work. I think Thomas is still a good player, but he's got one of those attitudes. And of course, once he's off the team, he's tweeting all the time, and this is an issue. So obviously, Michael Thomas is one of those, I think. It has an attitude that needs to be removed in order for the culture to survive. Well, the culture did pretty good for years and years with Marshawn Lattimore and Michael Thomas, but yet now they're an issue. I think the issue is Dennis Allen as the head coach. And Thomas had an attitude. Sean Payton suspended him for a game for the fight he had with C.D. Deuce, and that's because we had a head coach who said, no, this is the way we're going to do it. You're a great player. You're bought in, but you can't do this. Sit down. Dennis Allen can't even sit down a player that's hurt. I mean, what the world? Does Derek Carr owe you something? You owe him something? I don't get it. I don't get it. Come here, Ryan. I don't get it at all. Another player that could possibly have an attitude now is Cameron Jordan. How about that? This is the epitome of the way a player is supposed to be. Professional, funny with the media, a personality, a great teammate, never misses a game, is always playing at 100%. This guy's a problem now? Well, he was asked the post-game interviews and postseason interviews about leadership, and The question was meant for the leaders of the team as the players. And when he mentioned leadership, he kind of mentioned there could be a change with leadership and also with players. It was something like that, where he was separating leadership from players. And it read, you can read in, doesn't take a genius, that he was saying, yeah, there should be some changes with the coaching staff, but not so much with the players. Is he an attitude all of a sudden? Is this a concern for Dennis Allen all of a sudden? A guy that's been with this team for over a decade? And all year long, of course, Alvin Kamara, who's been honest and he's been given some great answers. And you can read a lot into what's going on behind the scenes when you analyze what Alvin Kamara tells you. You know, he tells you just enough to stay out of trouble and be truthful at the same time. It's very possible Alvin Kamara could be another one of those players that has an attitude. So Mickey Loomis is going to keep Dennis Allen as his head coach, and they're going to sit there and dream of the Drew Brees Peyton era, and they're going to wish for this nice franchise with the culture, and let's get rid of the problems, so we're going to get rid of the best players on the team. It seems like that's the area we're going. Well, the four guys I mentioned, Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, Marshawn Lattimore, Cameron Jordan, they're all getting older. Marshawn Lattimore's still playing at the top of his game. I think Alvin Kamara's still got a few years left in him. I think Michael Thomas still has a few years left in him. Cameron Jordan, I'm not too sure about. But they're all older players, and if you're going to turn a page and you're going to wipe out, the 2017 draft, you already wiped most of it out. You want to go ahead and knock out Kamara and Lattimore too, and you think it's going to change the culture. I just hope that whoever you bring in is going to buy into Dennis Allen, and I don't think that that's a guarantee. So there's probably a lot of younger players who are bought in, and they're bought in because the veterans told them to buy in, because Dennis Allen is a great defensive coach. But as a head coach, I think he's starting to rub people the wrong way. Not Derek Carr. Derek Carr thinks he's the greatest head coach ever. But I bet there's a lot of other players who have an issue with him. So what's the real issue? Is it the culture or is it the head coach? I think all of that was on exhibit at the end of the Falcons game when the mustacheless Arthur Smith told Dennis Allen that was some blankety blank blank blank. And as a Saints fan, I didn't mind. Standing back and looking at it, I see the issue that people have. Nobody got hurt. It's the Falcons, so screw them. And I'd have gone for, if it was Sean Payton, but people were saying this, if it was Sean Payton, the players wouldn't have done that. They would have ran victory formation. If it was Sean Payton, we would have lined up to run another play. That's the disconnect that people have. Sean Payton would have ran up the score. Sean Payton would have given Jamal Williams a touchdown right there because he could. And Sean Payton would have said, oh, well, deal with it. Stop me. But Sean Payton would have ran a formation. He would have ran a play. If Sean Payton would have called victory formation from the 1 yard line, he would have been chewing out Tyrann Mathieu for running that interception back as far as he did before he ran victory formation. He'd have been chewing out Tyrann Mathieu for not hitting the ground after he picked that ball up. And then the team would have gone out there and able to definitely knelt in the ball victory formation because you had a head coach who was taking care of business, who was making his point clear, who was going after, an all-world player in Tyrann Mathieu, who should have hit the deck when he intercepted the ball. But when he took off, I was cheering the whole time. Go for it. Go for it. What's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is you get hurt. That's the worst. And I think Tyrann got ran down by an offensive lineman. So, yeah. But damn, man. Hit the ground. The worst that can happen is you fumble, they return it for a touchdown, and you don't win by so much. But you're up by so much that, Hey, if the Falcons would have got the ball, they would have gone for it. They would have ran a few more plays. They were out of it. The game was over a long time before that play, and they were still running plays, moot, running moot plays. So anyway, that's the way I look at it. You guys, tell me what you think. Uh, I think we can trade Marshawn Lattimore after this draft. I think we can trade him, pick up a first round pick. I think we can move on from Marshawn. He's a great player, and I would love for him to stay around, and he's worth every penny we pay him. But our defense is set up to be very successful. I think you trade Marshawn for a first round pick, you'll have two of them in next year's draft, two first round picks. And there's a lot of cornerback depth in this draft, as a matter of fact. So it's not like you can't pick up some pieces. And you've already got a bunch. Maybe you re-sign Isaac Yiadom, who's not nearly the player Lattimore is, but we're going to ask him to be our third cornerback. And hopefully you can get him for $4 to $6 million a year, because I think that's what he might end up demanding. You know, and then you're good there. Alvin Kamara, well, you know, you had to go, 5 games without him this year. Our running game wasn't that bad. As long as Kendre Miller is healthy, I think we have our eventual Kamara replacement. It's not the same type of back as Kamara, but I think we can have a lot of success with Kendre Miller. But the injury thing, you just don't know. So I think Kamara should be with the team next year for sure. And then if we can get out after that, we should, because I don't want to pay him $25 million 2 years from now when he's 30-something years old. I'd rather get rid of him a year early than a year late. But before we get rid of him, yeah, I think we need to get another running back in the building, somebody that isn't Jamal Williams. Hey, Jamal's going to be here 3 more years. If Kendre stays healthy, Jamal, I still think we need a third piece. But yeah, Kamara should stick around. Michael Thomas is going to be gone. He shouldn't be re-signed, and let him go play with Denver or Kansas City or Arizona or wherever he wants to go. And then Cameron Jordan, he just signed a 2-year extension. I think Cam's going to be here. Cam's going to play, and Cam's going to be a good teammate no matter what. And despite what he said about players and leadership and everything else, I believe personally we need to move away from Cameron because we need to improve at that defensive end spot. Cameron is not getting better. And so that's my opinion on the players. You guys let me know what you think. Maybe we'll trade Taysom Hill to Denver. That's such a possibility in this offseason. Restructure him and then trade his ass. I love Taysom Hill. I'd hate to do it, but gosh, Sean Payton loves to give up draft picks, and we could use some this year. In this coming up draft, we could use some. All right, there you go. That's my opinion. Dennis Allen is the problem. He shouldn't be our head coach. And, yeah, it's pretty obvious that they don't respect him. And it's pretty obvious that we have a good team, a team of some pretty good players who could be successful. I'm Joe. Subscribe to Rosenfield 10 for more videos like this. And I will talk to you later. Who dat?